Just turn the time over. Come on here, let's get over here and tell us a few words of wisdom.
Right. Well, a few words of wisdom. Don't we all need them these days? First of all, it is so wonderful to be here this morning, and I say that with real enthusiasm because I think this is the first time I have spoken to a group like this in a long, long time. And I know that one of the real perks of serving in public office is being able to interact with the community. I mean, that is really what it's all about. And I think the inability to do that makes it very, very difficult in what are very, very trying times. And I appreciate Jen's kind words about the work on the county commission right now. I will tell you, I find myself missing the city council on a fairly regular basis. So for what it's worth, I'm finding it very challenging. And the reason I'm finding it very challenging is because the issues that we are facing as a community right now are very challenging. And I thought what I would do is just give you the bird's eye view of what it has looked like from my perspective for the last 3 months and talk a little bit about a few of the boards that I sit on. Because, you know, one of the things I learned during the years on council is it's really your board assignments that give you the opportunity to have a significant impact in a sort of directed area. And in my case, I sit on 4 different boards in different capacities that I think allow me to sort of delve a little deeper into some of the issues that I'm going to talk about. There is no question that the COVID pandemic, and the economic fallout from it are the biggest challenge facing the community in the short term. We have staved off an eviction and foreclosure crisis by hook or by crook, sort of almost jumping from life raft to life raft to try to sort of extend people's time in housing. But at some point, the rent is going to be due, the mortgage payments are going to have to be satisfied, and it's still very unclear where the money's going to come from, if it is, to deal with a lot of that. The county and the city of Tampa have been very, very proactive in doing everything that we can to provide rental assistance and assistance in some cases now directly to landlords. But at some point, local government's ability to solve this problem is just going to run out. And you know, we can't print money the way that the federal government does. So living within our means, is really paramount. And that leads into our other major challenge, which is infrastructure. And the fact that we are growing, you know, the one thing the pandemic has not done is stop the growth in Florida. We are now 1.4 million people in the state. Every day new residents are arriving. And the stresses of growth and what it means for our infrastructure are a very real challenge for us every single day. Last night we had a late meeting talking about community plans in South County. There is a real crisis in South County in terms of infrastructure. The transportation system, while stressed everywhere else in the county, it is totally broken in the South County area, and traffic and congestion are really totally out of control. We have some water challenges in terms of delivery of fresh water and also the removal of wastewater. Most of those issues are short and medium term, not long term issues, but they're expensive and they're going to be challenging to deal with over the next 5 to 6 years. We're about 20 fire rescue stations short of what we need to have the appropriate response times for emergency management services. So fire rescue, just like in the city, is always in need of support. In terms of schools, we have real questions about how the process of school concurrency and school capacity actually work when new development is being approved. I think that both the school board and the county commission are going to be having a joint workshop in the next couple months to try to delve into the details of how the decisions are made of what development should be entitled to what credits and what seats in certain schools. There are, in certain parts of the county, major overcrowding problems, and as I'm sure you've learned, the school board is facing some really, really significant budget challenges. And then the main enchilada, the big elephant, of course, is transportation. And in that area, we have about an $800 million plan for improvements. And right now, as about a week ago, we're about $200 million short in our projections of what we're going to have to do that work. And that's work that is not just road widening and resurfacing, but also complete streets projects, which put in sidewalks and bike lanes and deal with the fact that we are the single most, or the second most, depending on what year it is, dangerous place in America for bicyclists and pedestrians. And we have to take significant and concrete steps to start to address that. This is the money that we need for that, for intersection improvements, for better lighting, for crosswalks. In the state of Florida, as I know everyone is probably aware, if you live within 2 miles of a school, you're not eligible for what they call courtesy busing. And that means that if there's no safe route, there's a real danger there. And that should be at the very top of our priority list to fix. And we are chronically underfunded in the transportation area. For a year, we have been waiting for a decision from the Florida Supreme Court on the fate of the 1-cent sales tax that was voted in 2018. It has been collected for 2 years, and it is basically an escrow, waiting to deal with these problems, waiting to sort of see how it's going to resolve. Excuse me, one second. Sorry. So that's sort of an overview of what I've been. I'm sorry, my math is getting.
Oh, Harry, we don't need to our master speaker.
Oh, can I? Okay, I'm gonna.
Yeah, you've got the good distance here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, you all see what the math says.
Very good.
So that's an overview, and I'll take some questions later, and we can get into the specifics of some of that if people are interested in that. But I do want to talk about the boards for a minute, because it allows me to just delve in specifically to a few concrete areas that I think deserve a little bit of attention. When I was on city council, I served on the MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Transportation, and also on the board of the Strass Center. And I'm serving on both of those boards now. In the case of the MPO, because I had served as vice chair and chair of their policy committee for many years, I was elected chair of the MPO when I got on it in December. The MPO is the organization that ranks traffic projects and ranks basically any transportation-related project and sets some priorities. It contains city council members and county commissioners and representatives from the port and the airport and the school district. And we basically hash out our priority list for submission to the state, for submission for federal funding, and also sort of a rough determination of what the localities are going to prioritize. They're not necessarily, the mayor's not and the city council aren't necessarily bound by what their priorities are at the MPO, but it's a very good way of all of the jurisdictions coordinating with one another in terms of transportation projects. As I said earlier, am going to make safety the top priority, at least in my lexicon. That's the thing that ought to be number one on our agenda. Congestion is enormously important. Transit is enormously important. We are still, probably 2 decades behind when it comes to having any alternatives other than cars and, what is admittedly a fairly anemic bus system. I'll get back to the MPO in a minute. Strass Center is also something I worked on for, I think 7 of the 8 years that I was on council. I was on their board. And they have a major master plan that they are advocating for right now. The city, very generously, and I believe Councilman Carlson was one of the votes and supporters of this, is going to allocate $25 million for the CRA over a period of the next 5 years in support of that master plan, and I am going to be advocating that the county make a similar investment. I think that the pandemic has really proved how much, as a community and as a society, we love the performing arts. And what it's also shown is how much people can enjoy interacting with the arts from the Riverwalk. There is a stage that is now out onto the Riverwalk that has performances on it because it's really all they can do when they can't let people in. And it's just unbelievable to watch the public engagement with that stage. So I think as they move through this master plan project, it's going to be really important to encourage them to continue to look for innovative ways to actually engage with the city. My sense of when the pandemic will end really is tied to when the Strata Center says they can begin operations again, because you can imagine, given the way that their seating is and the way that their performances are structured, unless you have a comprehensive testing system and really good protocols in place, you're just not going to be able to have live performances like we're used to. You can't have people seated in every fourth seat in the Morsani Hall and expect to make a profit on a Broadway show. So, which aren't touring right now anyway. So, my guess for them is the fall. They just announced that Hamilton, which was supposed to be here in June, won't be here until 2022. And I think that gives you a sense of where the calendar is in terms of when you can expect things to start to be back to normal in terms of the performing arts. The other two boards that I am currently on are the Port Authority and Tampa Bay Water. And the Port Authority, which Commissioner Merman sat on also, and it's not because it's in District 1, but it is in fact in District 1. And just for everyone's edification, District 1 is basically, it sort of hugs western and coastal Hillsborough County. It starts in the northwest part of the county and starts with Odessa and Keystone, sort of meanders into parts of Citrus Park, West Chase, Town and Country, West Tampa, the entire South Tampa Peninsula, parts of downtown, and then a swath of South County from Gibsonton, Apollo Beach, and half of Ruskin. So it's a very, very diverse district, but one of the things that the entire area have in common is that it's probably 90% of the coastal area of Hillsborough County. So the Port Authority is a pretty natural fit for the person that represents District 1. Port Authority has been really interesting because they are really living in two totally separate universes right now. On one hand, their container business is thriving. They are bringing in containers in record numbers. We have brand new cranes that are able to unload the cargo very efficiently. We now have, because of the Selma connector, the ability to get anywhere in the eastern United States without a traffic light all the way up to the state of Maine. And if you look at a map of the distribution centers along I-4, you can see that Tampa is really becoming a major both distribution and receiving center for the southern and eastern United States. So very, very exciting in terms of what the port is doing with containers and also with the commercial customers that they are bringing in who are actually becoming permanent residents of the port. And the port isn't just here, it also wraps around the bay and takes in a pretty significant area in South County. Another thing that's really great that I've learned about the port, and I did not know this, but it's, I think, fascinating and very exciting. If anyone knows those two abandoned little spoiler islands in the middle of Hillsborough Bay, I'd always wondered what they were. And I come to find out that that's where the port deposits the dredged sand that comes up when they are constantly dredging the shipping channel. Shipping channel is constantly being dredged. Every single year there are parts of it that are being deepened in order to keep the port functional. And all of the sand that comes out of there goes onto those islands. And then for the part of the year when they are not dredging, they work with the Audubon Society and it becomes a absolutely phenomenal bird sanctuary. And so it's a really unique partnership that allows us to do something really important that we have to do for business and commerce, and yet at the same time creates a real environmental opportunity. So that's a really interesting thing. On the other side of the equation, the port makes its living based on cruise passengers and cruises. And for the most part, the cruise industry is completely dead at the moment. And while they've been lucky enough, not lucky enough, I think fortunate enough would be a better term, and it's fortunate they've worked hard to make happen. I think that the fact of the matter is the lack of cruise revenue, the lack of cruise passengers is a major challenge. And the question of not just when, but if and how and whether the cruise ship industry is going to return the way it was is a big open question that has not really been. We just can't see the light at the end of that tunnel yet. The cruise ships say that they're going to get started again soon, but it's hard to imagine, given the circumstances, exactly how that's going to work. And I think that when it happens, it'll be good, but it's clearly a short and medium-term challenge for the Port Authority. And then there's Tampa Bay Water, which is a consortium of representatives from Pasco County, Hillsborough County, and Pinellas County, who govern the region's water supply. And I don't think it is any secret to say that over the years, there has been a lot of tension between the city of Tampa, who has all the water, and not all the water, but most of the water, and particularly some of the elements in Pasco and Pinellas County who are recipients of the water. And the tensions are understandable. Tampa is the only of the 6 jurisdictions in part of Tampa Bay Water that does have a special carve out, and that's because of the Hillsborough River being a source. But it's definitely the place where regional cooperation that everyone talks so aspiringly about really gets tested. Because in order for our regional approach to water to work, everybody's got to compromise a little bit, and everybody's got to take a few steps forward and trust that their partners are going to deliver on what they say and be good to their word. And when you're talking about water, you really are talking about the lifeblood of the community. If you do not have water, you got, as Charlie Brando would say, you got nothing. So that's been interesting. Hillsborough County is sort of in a unique situation on Tampa Bay Water because not only are we the sort of largest and wealthiest jurisdiction, but we sort of are in a no man's land in terms of the issues between the city of Tampa and the Pinellas and Pasco players. I think of us as being sort of the Switzerland in that situation. Although let's face it, Tampa is in Hillsborough County, and I'm a huge believer that we have to be very, very cognizant of, first and foremost, of the city and county interests where we live. And that just leads me to this, which is that it's very, very important for the city and the county and all levels of government to cooperate. Because if we don't cooperate, if we vilify each other and don't get along, we cannot make progress for the community. One of the things that I appreciate so much about Bill Carlson, and that I appreciated when I was in his role with Sandy Merman, was that our offices, us personally, but our offices, all the things we do, we try to work with each other. And if it's a city issue, I want to help the city resolve it. If it's a county issue, they try to help us resolve it. Sometimes, in unique situations, we can partner together. Finally, back to COVID. The vaccine rollout, I know, has been very frustrating. I think it's been frustrating across the country, period. There are a lot of things that have been wrong with the country, state, and localities' responses to the COVID pandemic. Although I will tell you, I think the local governments, for the most part, have really done the best that they can under the circumstances. But here's the facts of the matter. COVID vaccinations are not a total inequity in terms of people of color and people of low income, and people with access to the internet being able to get vaccinated. Rural residents versus urban. This has really laid bare a lot of the inequities that were behind a lot of what happened this past summer. And nothing is more revealing than a health crisis where you can actually watch different outcomes based on sort of where a person is in relation to the system. And I think that there is a real reckoning that is going to have to happen in this country in the wake of all this. And I don't think once the emergency of the pandemic is over, that we can ignore a lot of the systemic problems, the systemic racism, and the systemic economic inequality that is getting worse and worse and worse in this country. And before I take questions, I just do want to end with this. I'm very much in the weeds of sort of specific local government problems, and that's probably what we're going to talk about today, and probably what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. But if you ask me what I thought the single biggest problem facing this country is, other than the existential threat of climate change, which will just wipe away the whole enterprise, I would tell you that I think the income inequality, the gap between rich and poor, the gap between black and white, the gap between urban and rural, these divisions are, forget about the personalities of the 2020 election. These divisions are what is ultimately, I think, driving this civic unrest that we see in this country. And we've got to face it head on, and we've got to talk about it and look at it squarely, and really look within ourselves to figure out what we can do to help bridge those gaps. I mean, $15 minimum wage is fine, but by the time it actually gets done, it'll be too little. And we can't constantly be in a too little, too late situation in terms of people's income. So I'm going to stop there and